This feature, The Future of Work, is funded by the News Reporting Scheme.
Welcome to this week's episode of The Future of Work on Clare FM. Late last year, the Department of Health published a paper on Ireland's future health and social care workforce. The paper forms part of the department's long-term planning projections for the future needs of these sectors. This planning is necessary in the context of a growing and ageing population, rising chronic disease levels, and our high reliance on foreign educated workers amid a global shortage of healthcare staff. With the implementation of planned health policies and workforce reforms, there will be an average annual growth rate required of approximately 1.4 to 2% up to 2040 for certain professions. Dr. James Ring is CEO of TTM Healthcare Group based in Ennis, County Clare.
Basically, we're workforce management for the healthcare industry. So what that means is that when the hospitals or the private healthcare providers, when they need extra staff, maybe that's due to surge demand, maybe it's due to holiday cover, or just general vacancies they might be able to fill, they'll ring organisations like TTM and they'll ask us to send in some of our staff. So we've, at any one time, we've the bones of between 1,500 and 2,000 staff who go out and work in hospitals all over this country, not just hospitals, but all healthcare providers. So they ring us and then we send our runners out. We call them, they're called runners in our world, and they'll fill shifts. They may need to fill them every day. Others might be very ad hoc. It might be just an evening shift, a day shift, a weekend shift, whatever it is. But our job is to provide high quality, qualified and compliant staff to the industry to make sure that patients are looked after to the highest possible care and safety.
That might suggest that there is a lack of staff within either the HSE or other facilities. Is that the case?
There is always a need for more talent to come into the healthcare industry. And in Ireland, it's particularly difficult because if you think about it, firstly, we do lose a lot of graduates to sunnier climates. So we know a lot of young nurses and doctors, they'll go to places like Australia for the climate, for the lifestyle, sometimes for better salaries and whatnot. Some of them will go to the States. A lot of particular doctors will end up going to the States for a while to build out their portfolio of skills and strengths. Then you couple that with an ageing demographic here in Ireland. And we are an ageing society. We are living longer, we need more care, and hence you have this, if you like, perfect storm. And that's where people like us come in then to try and help deal with that. As well as that, it isn't easy to find talent. Like, healthcare is a difficult profession. It's very, very tough work in terms of, just the energy you need to bring into the room every day, the high pressure situations that they're in. It's not for everyone. I always say nurses should have wings because they're angels, for what they do. But so do healthcare assistants, so do the cleaners. So they all pull together to make this system work. So look, to answer your question, it's a blend of, yes, we'll always have a staff shortage because the demographics change so quickly and we're getting older and need more care. But also, yes, it is hard to generate enough talent through our natural university pipelines to fulfill the demand that's out there. So in terms of where my staff come from, it's literally anywhere and everywhere you could imagine. So the vast majority of them are already here. They're living in Ireland, working in Ireland, and they've chosen to be what we call agency workers rather than full-time healthcare workers. And what that means is they have a flexibility. They're effectively their own boss and can do their own shifts as and when they want, which works for a lot of people. In terms of the supply of staff, as I said, the majority will be obviously Irish because of the nature of the beast, but you could probably name any country in the world, Paddy, and we have people from those countries. We do get a lot of people coming in from, in particular, India, and you would see an awful lot of Indian people working in our healthcare facilities around the country. You would also see a lot of Nigerian people in the facilities, particularly as healthcare assistants. But literally, our applications come from everywhere. But we are lucky to have a good blend of diversity across our staff, and I think any organisation benefits when you've got that level of diversity. The most important thing is, regardless of the demand or regardless of where these people need to be put wherever in the country, patient safety is number one. So that means there is huge onus on organisations like TTM to make sure that the staff we put out are extremely compliant. And what compliance means is that they have huge amounts of certification needed to go and work. And every role is different. So a nurse needs a certain number of qualifications and certifications and whatnot. A HCA would need different amount, doctor needs different amount. Whatever suits the role. But the HSE have laid out very stringent compliance demands on us, and we have to deliver that. So that's a huge part of what we do here in TTM. It takes an awful lot of time because, sometimes it's qualifications, simple stuff that they would already have. But other times it might be blood work. So they might need to get vaccinations to protect themselves in the workforce and the patient. It's a big range, but the most important thing for, I think, anyone in this game is ensuring that the staff we put out are safe and secure, because at the end of the day, it's all about patients, not about us.
Are you always looking for more staff? Are the jobs there?
There's huge demand in this industry, and it'll only get bigger. The HSE obviously are trying to fill their own demand, but they rely on organisations like us to help to ease the pressure. The difference though is, in the HSE land and private healthcare providers, not just HSE, they're looking for effectively full-time workers, which is perfectly fine and reasonable. But in the land of workforce management, it's different. So the people who work for us, they probably don't want a full-time job. There's a mix, right? So you'll have some who do, but they need maybe to build their experience level so they can get in through the agency work, build their experience, get to know what it's like working in hospitals or whatever care facilities they want to choose to work in. And then they may end up working full-time in the HSE or wherever else at a certain point in time. So you'd see that maybe with younger people who are just trying to get their foothold in the industry. Then you have another cohort of people who it's more about work style, work-life balance, work choice. So for example, we would have a lot of mothers who maybe can't work a full-time job because of kids. Maybe they can't commit to 5 days a week or whatever. Maybe only weekends suit them, whatever way it works. So you'll find that there's an awful lot of parents who do this and work around their life. Maybe the other spouse is working full-time and they do it part-time, etc., etc. And others just like the flexibility of doing it their way. So it's like, if you think about it, if you choose to be an agency worker, you're effectively your own boss. You don't have to work this week if you don't want to. So if you don't want to get up on a Monday morning, you don't have to get up on a Monday morning. And there's a lot of benefit to that. If you want to do extra shifts, you can do that, within certain criteria for the HSE. So that's the blend between people who choose to work in the HSE and other care facilities full-time versus an agency staff, which gives you more flexibility and variation.
You might have staff going through here who want to go on and work in the HSE.
Yeah.
Has it worked the other way? People who worked in the system, in the national health system, and decided they wanted to do it this way as a contractor?
It works both ways. And it's right to work both ways if you think about it, because, for example, if you think about your stages of life, so like when you're a young person and you're trying to get your foot on the ladder, yourself, the amount of times you're told, sorry, you don't have enough experience. So agency gives them probably a better way to get in there and get that. But there comes a time then when you're kind of hitting your late 20s where maybe you start thinking about mortgages and whatnot, although that's a tough battle at the moment for people. But you know what I'm trying to get at? Thinking about getting a more grown-up lifestyle. And then that's where you might start looking at a full-time role and that kind of security. And then there comes a time where the kids come in and maybe you can't do full-time anymore. So hence, you might think about going back towards a more flexible agency role. And then later in life, when the kids are grown up, you might go back into the full-time role. So it gives you that variation. It's one of the unique things about healthcare. It kind of gives you, for whatever stage of life you're at, there's a real benefit to either move into perm or move into agency and everything in between.
What roles then would be available to someone coming through TTM Healthcare?
Literally anything and everything. There's huge demand right across the board. And I think this is really important for people if they're listening to this at home and thinking about a career in healthcare. I often think healthcare professionals, it's more vocational than just normal jobs because it's such a difficult role, but such a rewarding role at the other side of it. And whether it's someone who has very, very high levels of qualifications like medical doctors or nurses with degrees and masters and whatnot, or it's more roles like MTAs, which is multitask assistants, and that could be anything from cleaners and people who are serving food in canteens or into hospital beds to healthcare assistants. There's various levels of qualifications needed. So for example, some people listening to this might think, I'm not that academic, I don't know if I could get into this world, but I have a passion or a love or a want to try and help and care for people. There's plenty of roles for people who may not be academically gifted, but have that passion and desire to work in this industry. So don't let anything put you off. Those of us who are more academic, there's roles, we know what they are. They're the nurses, they're physiotherapists, they're speech and language therapists, doctors, whatever. The beauty of healthcare is I think there's something for everyone. But I think the core facet of it all, it has to be the people that I engage with, the people that I meet. One thing they all share, regardless of background, regardless of academia, regardless of the life they live, the people who work in healthcare really care about just trying to help patients. Because you know what? There'll come a day every one of us will need it. And all I always say to my people out here on the floor of TTM is, our job is to look after the people who look after patients. So my people here in TTM, we have to mind our runners. We have to get the best possible ones, make sure they have the right environment and what they need to go out and go into these healthcare facilities and look after people like me and you. Because someday it will be me and you. And I hope that when I'm lying in a bed, when someone comes towards me, they're wearing a TTM uniform. And do you know why? Because I know that they're high quality. And that's okay with me.
We see situations where a hospital might be short of staff, maybe a private hospital or a public hospital. Do you ever struggle to get staff? Can you get as many staff as you want to fill the gaps?
That's a tricky question because there's lots of roles that need filling across the sector. You get lots of applications in from everywhere, all over this country, all over the world. But the truth of the matter is, it's all about patient safety. So actually, when you filter it down, you don't end up with a huge amount of people that you would feel comfortable putting them out to work. And that's where the real challenge for us is finding very, very highly skilled and compliant people who we would say, we would stand over putting them out to work because we believe that they're of a certain quality and standards for patient safety and care. The big answer, I suppose, there's loads of people applying. But the shorter answer and the more detailed answer is yes, but they're not at a level or a quality. So we're always struggling to find the right number of quality candidates. And that will always be the eternal battle, I think, in agency work.
Could it be the case, James, as well, that there could be suitably qualified people out there who don't want to work in the mainstream system, in the HSE or in a private hospital, but might not be aware that this option is available to them?
Oh, I'd say there is. Or don't know how to get into it. You know, they maybe have heard about it because, to be fair, most people, if they're working in, take Ennis General down the road there, right? So in Ennis, you're going to have a blend of agency staff and full-time HSE staff, right? So they'll know, like one will know the other side in terms of, because they work side by side seamlessly. I think probably a lot of people might think, is it the right time to move into agency? How do I move into agency? Do I walk down the road to Ballybailey Business Park and call into TTM, which they can, or do they apply online, or what way is it? So I think the most important thing is, I would say to people who are thinking about agency work, if they're working in healthcare settings and are thinking about it, just talk to your colleagues. And if it is the right thing for you at the right stage of your life because of whatever challenges or circumstances you find yourself in, then consider it. If not, stay full-time and keep working. And then for younger people, I would say, think about agency as a stepping board to build your experience and to allow you get some skin in the game so that you will see then what it's like to work in healthcare facilities. And hopefully when openings come in that healthcare facility, you might be first in line to get that job on a full-time basis. So it's a good way for people to either build their experience or a lifestyle choice.
Looking to the future and the future of that workspace, you honestly believe that there will always be a demand?
There will always be people who can't work full-time. And if you're a nurse who just, for whatever reason, isn't able to commit to full-time care, if you didn't have agency work, you may not be able to find a part-time role that suits you and what you need. You know, there may be part-time roles, but it just doesn't align with the hours that you need. So because of that, I think what you would hate to see is that the healthcare world loses quality people because it just can't facilitate the stage of life they're at. And I think agency gives that great pressure release valve so people like that could come in here. But also remember, the world that we're living in, like, it must be so difficult to run the HSE and try and really plan and predict for patient needs because they're so rapidly changing all the time. Yes, there's a level of prediction and then you can see what the data is telling you and you can try and plan for that. But I think there'll always need to be that pressure valve, and the pressure release valve for the HSE and organisations in this world will always be agency.
We talked earlier about the graduates who are taking off for sunnier climes, for the money, for the climate, for a better way of life. Do you find, James, that some of those are coming back and want to get back into this workspace through TTM?
Yeah, exactly. You see that quite a lot. And you can understand it. We all did it. I did it when I was young. I didn't go off to sunnier climes. I went to Dublin, but I ended up coming back to the Midwest after a few years. And actually, funny enough, the group of friends that I had, we all did that. We all went to Dublin. So you do see that, is that we all, like, and I would encourage young people to go off and sample life, go further than I did, go beyond Dublin, go to wherever, but live a life, because you know what, you're tied down with responsibilities for long enough. But what you'll then see is when they get to the late 20s, early 30s, maybe thinking about starting families, that type of stuff, maybe getting a bit homesick and wanting to, maybe their parents are aging and they want to come home, that type of thing, people start coming back. So you would see a lot of people with, say, late 20s, early 30s bucket, and it is that kind of coming home to kind of set up a home for their family for the future. Like, what I would say to anyone interested in getting into healthcare, the demand is huge. There's buckets of jobs. So you'll never be looking for work, that's for sure. I think the key question comes down to decide what kind of lifestyle you want and let work then suit you. So if you are someone who values full-time work, who values that security, that structure, that regular income, then go and work full-time in one of the healthcare providers anywhere in this country. There's demand everywhere. If you're someone who values work-life balance, flexibility, or you're at a stage of life where you need that level of flexibility, or you don't need to work full-time anymore, then I would strongly consider coming and working for an agency like TTM.
That was Dr. James Ring, CEO of TTM Healthcare Group, based in Ennis, County Clare. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Future of Work.
This feature, The Future of Work, is funded by the News Reporting Scheme.